and welcome to another episode of Finders Keepers, the podcast that helps you find the best keepers for your keeper and dynasty leagues. I'm your host Jordox, and round 6 of the AFL season was an absolute belter. 5 of the 9 games were decided by under 10 points, and in 3 of those 5 games, both sides kicked over 100 points. So it was high scoring, it was close, and certainly not without its drama. And yeah, there were heaps of stories to come out of the round, a lot of them with Keeper League ramifications. Unfortunately, we did see some serious injuries with Sam Darcy, such a shame, rupturing his ACL. And amazingly, he did it around 20-30 metres away from the exact spot where his dad did the exact same injury at the same ground 21 years ago, also in round 6 against the Cats. And of course, I'm talking about his dad, Western Bulldogs legend Luke Darcy. Pretty weird. But yeah, Keeper League owners not thinking about how weird it is, just very disappointed to lose their star man for, well, probably 12 months. I had a pretty average round personally in my leagues. I may be one of those Sam Darcy owners. I'm also a very frustrated Jordan Ridley owner, but yeah, not a great round for me. And yeah, Lady Luck is certainly giving me a wide berth at the moment. So fingers crossed things start to turn for me from here, and I can start climbing a little bit higher in all my leagues. But on to the round itself, and as I said, it was a brilliant round of footy and lots to go through, so I'll jump straight into it. Beginning, of course, with my top waiver picks for this week, and as usual, I'll run through the names I gave you last week, and we'll have a look at how they fared. Once I've done that, I'll just get stuck into the things that caught my eye across the round, and then wrap up this episode. So last week, my top 5 waiver picks for regular leagues started with number 1, Elijah Sardis for Essendon. He was owned by 65% of leagues, and that has now gone up to 80%. He scored 89, had a really nice midfield role once again, and that's 2 weeks in a row. He's done really well. So I think if you nabbed him, you'd be very pleased knowing that he can go really high. I mean, that's a couple of 80s now. Yeah, exciting times, I reckon. And not just for those who grabbed him. I'm sure there's some long-time coaches who've had him for all this time. Great to see him playing and playing well. Number 2 was Bailey Williams for West Coast. I don't know. It made sense to have him there. He was the number 1 ruck. Had a nice 115 the week before. But up against more formidable opposition this week in Luke Jackson and Mason Cox. Williams went from 41% ownership up to 77%. Didn't reward those who jumped on. He scored a paltry 44, and I reckon he could probably show him the door. Number 3, I had Angus Anderson, who had a great debut for Collingwood, the mature age midfielder, and he backed it up. His ownership went up from 56% to 74%, and he scored a 78 and was really impressive once again. Really played a role in crucial parts of the game too for the Pies. Number 4, I had Darcy Byrne-Jones for Port Adelaide. He was at 41% ownership. That shot up to 59%, and he scored a 62. He had the same halfback role, just didn't get as much of the pill this week. I reckon he'll be fine. And then the last one was Nick Haynes, who sat at 40% ownership. That only went up to 58% on the back of his nice score last week, and he scored a 67 this week, which is, you know, it's not great, but it'll do. And these ownership numbers, just a reminder, these are ownership numbers for Keeper Fantasy Platform across all Keeper and Dynasty leagues. And the percentage is specific to the type of league. So the ownership numbers will be quite different for single season draft comps. Now looking at the names, the 5 names I gave for deeper leagues last week, let's see how they went. First one was Kyle Langford for Essendon. He had just 38% ownership. That's gone up to 60%. And he scored a 73 playing pretty much the same role. So I think you'd be pretty happy with that, especially in those deeper leagues. Mitch Lewis was at 31% for the Hawks. I had him at number 2. That's gone up to 55%. And he backed up his ton last week with a 92 this week. So another really good result there. Hunter Clark for the Saints came back last week. He was at 37%. Now he's up to 51%. Scored 63, which for the second week in a row, he had less than 50% time on ground. So 76 and then a 63 from half a game. I think that's pretty good. Hopefully they start to build up his time on ground and he can stay fit. Number 4 was a bit of a bust. I had Jake Stringer. 22% ownership, very low. That went up to 32 on the back of his midfield game last week, but it didn't happen again. Rouston came back in and that pushed Stringer out of the CBA rotations. He only had 10% this week and only scored 51. I reckon you could probably cut the package loose. And then number 5, Blake Hardwick had a ripping score the week before. His ownership went from 35% to 51% and he backed it up with a nice 84. So who do I like for this week? Well, I was putting a list together this week and I found that there was a real mixture of sort of high and low percentages for ownership. So I thought I'll just combine the whole lot and I've got 7 names for deep and regular leagues. And number 1 is a bit of a surprise, maybe a touch controversial, but I've been big on this guy and he's about to get his chance. Liam Reedy for Carlton. He's owned in 43% of keeper leagues and yes, he didn't look great early days, but I was sure he'd be back in the side last week, but I think he had a VFL suspension. So this week I was sure he'd be back because Mackay got injured. He got the concussion Thursday night, so he'll be out. And I've just since learnt that Pitnett's now injured as well. So Liam Reedy will be coming in as the number 1 ruck for Carlton. He's got the forward status. Yeah, I did recommend Bailey Williams last week. It didn't pan out, but I don't know. I'm having a go at Reedy. Number 2 is a lot more popular and probably what most leagues will have. Cam Zurhaar, only owned in 25% of leagues and had a somewhat, very surprising role change for North playing in the back line. He scored 113 and looked really good from all reports, so I dare say they'll continue with that. He'll be very popular this week. Number 3 is the debutant at Adelaide, Charlie Edwards. Finally got a debut. The Crows fans have been screaming for this kid to get a go for a couple of years now. And he really was like Angus Anderson at Collingwood the week before, in that he had a really heavy on-ball role and was quite pivotal. He had a lot of important centre clearances, has mid-defender status, owned in 42% of leagues, scored a 60 on debut, and was super impressive. So I've got him at number 3. Number 4 is Lockie Cowan at Carlton, 56% ownership, and I think a few have lost the faith in him. He's had a slow start to this season, but this was the first time we saw a bit more of what we expected after the back end of last year when he was hitting those 80s. He scored an 84, looked really good, and I reckon this could be the start of a better run for him, and I think he's a bit of a bargain if he's sitting in your pool, so go grab him. Number 5 is Colton Tholstrup for Melbourne. Bit of a different one, 27% ownership and scored a 73. I'll go into a bit more detail when I look at the game against Brisbane, but he's had a very big role change this week that really caught my attention. He took 10 of 12 kickouts for the Ds. There's a lot of names missing, but that's really interesting. And his position's a bit weird. If you play with the keeper DPPs, he's got mid-forward status, but if you play with the regular industry standard, he's got defender forward status, which is really flexible. So either way, DPP, and I like this role for him. Number 6, Phoenix Gothard for the Giants. He's just been chipping away. I sort of haven't gone to sort of recommend him just yet, but he keeps doing it. He's only owned 36% of leagues, playing a really nice role up the ground and scored a 99 on the weekend. He's been solid. And then number 7, Ethan Reed for the Suns, 55% ownership. And he played an interesting role on the wing, which he'd have to be the tallest winger we've ever seen. But he scored a 73 and sounded like he had a really good game playing in that role. So he's someone that I think a lot of people would have stashed at some point. If he's still about and he's, if he's gettable, he's playing on the wing, that makes him fieldable, and who knows what he could evolve into. So there's my 7. Some interesting names this week. We'll be looking forward to reviewing this list in a week's time, or maybe I won't be, but we'll see how we go. Good luck, and hopefully you can get some of those guys, and hopefully you're glad you did. So I'll jump into the things I noticed in round 6 from a keeper and dynasty league perspective, of course. And I will start with Thursday night, where we saw Carlton and Collingwood, 2 arch rivals, duke it out in a great game of footy. And unfortunately for the Baggers, it was the same old story. They looked really good at times, had a good lead, and then just dropped the bundle at the end. But well done to the Pies. It was a good win. So things I noticed, Lockie Cowan, I mentioned him, one of my waiver pickups. Just good for the owners to see a nice score from him. It's been a slow start after that injury interrupted pre-season. Was talking to a Carlton mate of mine about Cowan's role and his fantasy prospects. And he said, might need a change of coach, which could very well be happening for Carlton. Because, he was scoring really well at the back end of last year under Voss, but they had injuries, and now they've got Newman back, Ollie Florent. These guys are probably better, more likely distributors. So I think Cowan's had to be a bit more locked down, but I think in this game we saw he can score. So fingers crossed he can get released a little bit. That was kind of it for Carlton. Collingwood had a few names that were interesting. Darcy Cameron was a nice return to scoring for his owners with a nice 108. But curiously, he did it with only 25% of the centre ball attendances. The young fella, Oscar Steen, was preferred, and he scored 72 himself, Steen. He was really important. So, Steen's taken majority of the CBAs, but then around the ground it was Cameron with 61%. So, interesting split, and really interesting that Cameron scored a ton. So, interesting. Ned Long, nice return to his midfield role this week and a nice score with 87. Was just starting to wonder about him. So, very timely that he put up that score, and it did push young Angus Anderson a little bit out of the CBA rotations. Not a heap. Anderson was still just prolific and really important in just his second game, and he backed it up with a 78 as well. And lastly, Nick Dacos, game 100, and one of the best final quarters by an individual you're ever likely to see. 13 touches, 2 tackles, a goal, 2 goal assists, 5 score involvements, and, quite literally turned the game and won it for the Pies. Absolute legend. On to Friday night and the odd double header that sort of had a few people pretty annoyed that there were 2 games on a Friday night. I don't mind it that much. We used to have that on Saturday nights. Anyway, the first one was Geelong Bulldogs down at Geelong, and I thought we were up for a cracking game here, but it was one-sided from the off. Bulldogs, lots of injuries, and then even more injuries throughout the game. But, it was just a Geelong demolition. Jeremy Cameron kicked 10 goals, which just you don't see that often these days. And what a superstar. He's off and running now. Tanner Bruhn, interesting. So he scored 77 and had a pretty good game apart from the first quarter. He was on 1 at quarter time and then got to 77. So really interesting because a week ago, and I own Tanner Bruhn in my keeper, and I was hoping last week he played half back so he could get the DPP. But he played pure midfield. It just didn't matter because he scored 120 and was amazing. But then this week he gets pushed out of the CBAs, not entirely, but a fair whack, because Ocean Mullen was in there tagging Bontempelli. He scored 70 himself, Mullen, and I'll talk about Bont in a minute. But just really interesting, the Geelong midfield, and the next guy I'll talk about as well, really interesting. But I was surprised that Bruhn had such a big game in the guts, and then the next week he's sort of pushed out a little bit. But hey, it was the right call because Mullen tagged Bont to, nothing, and the Cats smashed him. Now, Max Holmes, he scored 96 in this game. I neglected to mention his role change last week. I just missed it, I'll be honest. He was moved completely out of the middle last week, and it was very similar this week, playing off half back. And I think it's because, James Warple's now back in the side. Obviously, I've talked about Tanner Bruhn being in the midfield. It's almost like they're building this midfield that doesn't necessarily need Holmes in there full time. Let him do what he does at half back. And then you've got those grunt guys, Warple, Atkins, and then obviously Bailey Smith is pretty bloody handy at the moment. So it's just an interesting mix, and great news if you're a Max Holmes owner, because if it keeps headed this way, he should pick up defender status again, which would be absolutely brilliant for your side. For the Bulldogs, it was a very dirty night, lots of injuries, just never got going in the match. Riley Sanders has had a nice few weeks with the extra midfield time, and he scored 79 and continued to have the midfield role. He had 45% of the centre ball ups, and I just think it'll continue for a little bit because Liberatore went out with concussion, and they're down a lot of soldiers. So I reckon Sanders keeps playing midfield for a bit, which is great. And then, Marcus Bontempelli. My goodness, what a tagger Ocean Mullen has become. And Bont scored 28 for the game. And I know he had a bit of a knee issue, but he played the full game. And I think I could be wrong on this one, I do think I saw this was his first career game, Bontempelli, where he didn't take a mark or lay a tackle. Incredible. I'd expect him to bounce back in a big way next week, though. So the other Friday night game was the Sydney Derby. Saw someone saying on X they weren't happy with it being called the Derby because that's what West Coast and Freo have, and I think they call that the Derby. So apologies if I got that wrong. So what do they call this one? The Battle of the Bridge. It's not bad. I reckon something like the Sydney Skirmish. Nah, that doesn't really roll off the tongue the same. Anyway, Sydney. Yeah, I thought Sydney would win this, and they did. They won it pretty well in the end. The Giants made a game of it, but Sydney are looking really hot. A couple of names for them. Angus Sheldrick returned from suspension, which is good, but his time on ground was only 53%. And that's the second game this year. It's been around the 50 mark. So I've talked about this guy a lot in the past and not sure what the issue is with him and not playing more minutes. But 53% time on ground and still scored 79, if you don't mind. And then there was footage after the game of him running laps around the oval. So, it's really weird. But anyway, really good signs. I think you'd be pretty happy if you're an owner. Callum Mills, on the other hand, 72 was his score in this game. He's just been, I don't know, he's been a touch underwhelming so far this year. A couple scores in the 90s, but I don't know, I was expecting a little bit more from him, even just off half-back, which is his go. But, you know, guys like Nick Blakey, Riley Bice, they're really racking it up and doing the scoring. So, I don't know. I don't know if it's a concern or if it's more just a case of he just needs to keep playing, build that continuity. He's missed a lot of footy, and maybe the scores will come later in the year. For the Giants, Lockie Ash was thrown into the CBA mix in the second half, which is a bit different. He's done it in the past, but yeah, since he's become this, you know, half-back guy, it was a bit odd. But look, Giants are trying things. He's still, I think, top scored, 114. Just continues on his merry way, Lockie Ash, absolute star. Harry Rouston came back into the side, and it looks like that little stint in the twos has done him a world of good. He looked a lot better in this game. Great return. He scored a 93 and only scored 2 points in the last quarter. So he was on track for a huge score, and then obviously went missing at the end there. Only had 28% CBAs, but yeah, that's a really nice score. Toby Green had 59%, so they threw him into the middle again. And as I mentioned in my waiver review, Jakey Stringer down to 10%, and yeah, nowhere near what we saw the week before. In the ruck, Nick Madden played his second game with Briggs still in the twos. He scored 67, but geez, there's a bit to look at his score and the whole role. So they brought in Lee Lear to help in the ruck against the very formidable Brodie Grundy. And Madden edged Alear for ruck contests around the ground, but the CBA mix was basically 50-50. So Madden scored 67, but he only played 56% of the game. So it's a very nice return considering that. But what's going to happen next week? Kieran Briggs had a pretty big game in the VFL. They're playing North. Tristan Sherry will be back. And yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what happens with Alear, but I do like Madden's chances of staying in the side and playing with Briggs and continuing to build. So we'll see what happens there. But I like Madden. I like him a lot. So I hope they stick with him. And Phoenix Gothard, like I said in my waivers, 99, very nice scoring, and just continuing a really nice season. And I wonder what this means for Brent Daniels' spot. They brought him back in last week. He scored pretty well, or he was all right, and then they've rested him this week because of the shorter break. So I think he'll be back, but I don't know, they've got a few guys playing that role, and Gothard is, doing a really good job. On to Saturday footy, Gold Coast took on Essendon, and the Bombers, much improved the last few weeks, really pushed the Suns, but Gold Coast got the win they really needed to get. Bailey Humphrey returned after his suspension. He missed a few weeks. He scored an 89 and was just back in that nice midfield forward role. 38% CBAs. I think he's building quite nicely, Humphrey. Will Powell was back into the midfield mix this week after being pushed out the week before. He scored a 95, continuing his pretty nice season. And Will Graham, unfortunately, got pushed out of the midfield role, and as a result just scored a 41. Ethan Reid, as I said in my waiver picks, found himself in a new spot on the wing, and I didn't watch this game, but I was listening on the radio and the commentators were going on about how good he looked on the wing in this role. So yeah, very interesting. For Essendon, Elijah Sardis with the 89. He was, I talked about him in my waivers as well because I recommended him as my number one last week. And yeah, he's just quietly slotted in well, Sardis. 25 touches to go with 29 last week. And there were some nice bounce back scores from Essendon midfielders. Darcy Parish and Jai Caldwell both hitting a 109 after very slow starts for them. Zach Merritt, huge game, a 151 if you don't mind. I think he was sort of half forward midfield for most of the game, and then they moved him to the half-back spot in the last quarter. And yeah, he just racked it up. He actually had a 99-point second half. And yeah, I think he's going to be someone who ends up with forward or defender status definitely before his career is done. And he can score wherever he is. So, yep, no surprises there. Zach Merritt, he is a fantasy legend. Jordan Ridley, oh man, came back from his injury last week, scored a ton. In this game was looking really good. Just plenty of ball in that back line. He was on 52 and then he got injured again in that second quarter with, I think it was a calf strain. It sounds minor. I'm hoping they're just really precautionary, but it'd be a shame. So I guess if Ridley's out, I guess what that's got me thinking is, does Merritt stay at halfback? You know, if you've got Sardis looking good, Parrish, Caldwell starting to get going. Will Setterfield, he would have played in the twos, I reckon. He might not be far off getting a game as well. So does Merritt move to halfback with Ridley out? There's some other names that were playing there. I mean, Kyle Langford has had a couple of weeks sort of playing wing, halfback, floating around. He scored 73. And even Saad El-Hawley had a nice score of 79. He spent a bit of time behind the ball as well. So, yeah, interesting to see what they do with that mix. And, you know, Archie Roberts continues to absolutely feast on the footy. Hawthorn Port was the later game on Saturday, and geez, Port Adelaide had a crack at Marvel. Hawks just held on in a cracking game of footy. Didn't have a lot for Hawthorn. Kausha Deer returned though. They had a couple of injuries. Marby Chol and Jack Gunston were out, so Kausha Deer came in, and just nice to see him back in the side. First game of the season. He's been in the VFL for a few weeks, and yeah, he came in, put up a 76, and yeah, really helped, especially in that second half. For Port Adelaide, a fair bit to talk about. Jason Horne-Francis had a whopping game, 126, very nice indeed. And he had high CBA numbers. And interestingly, 3 times this year, he's had over 50% CBA split. And in those 3, he scored 126 in this one, 87 and 128. So if they continue to move him into more predominantly as a midfielder as he improves his fitness, because he had those injuries in pre-season, he could end up having a real breakout, like a legit breakout. And for those playing with the industry standard dual positions, he did just pick up forward status, which is very handy. Miles Bergman's been a bit of a curious case this year. I really thought he would continue with his midfield breakout of last year, but I don't think he's been right. I don't think he's fully fit, and he's just been playing all sorts of different roles. But 85 in this game, which is promising, until you kind of look at the splits. So he scored 56 points in the second quarter, and then across the other 3 quarters, he went 5, 3, and 21. So 2 of his 4 quarters are single digits, and it's, yeah, a bit weird, but nice for him to get an 85. His owners would be desperately needing that. Dante Vicentini returned to the side to help Jordan Sweet take on the Lloyd Meek Ned Reeves setup that Hawthorn have been rocking all season. He scored 32, and yeah, look, the only reason I mention it is it's just going to eat into Jordan Sweet's scores, unfortunately. And then lastly, Logan Evans. He just talking about this guy last week, talking him up, and then he drops a 26, 5 touches. Yeah, he's very hard to trust, but I do like him. I just don't want him anywhere near my field if he's going to do that. Saturday night, and we saw Adelaide and St Kilda in a great game of footy, and ups and downs. And as a Crows fan, it was, well, like every game the Crows have played this year, just a roller coaster with a close finish. But thankfully we were on the right end of it this time. Charlie Edwards debuted, and I mentioned him in the waivers at the start of the episode. Scored a 60. He had 68% of the centre ball ups, and yeah, this was a fantastic debut for him. A guy who's been knocking the door down in the Sandful, and Crows fans have been screaming for a debut, but he finally came in. Yeah, he was in for Dawson, who I'm not sure when he'll be back. But it wouldn't matter who came back. There's no way Edwards goes out of the side after that performance. He's got the defender status too, which is handy. Braden Cook, he scored an 80, and he's kind of gone. His scoring this year has been 80 or 50, 60, just depending on how much gets to him. But this was another real standout game from him. Much like in round one against Collingwood, he just had the class and the skill when needed at really pivotal times. He is such a good player. I'm really excited as a Crows fan. And fantasy, it's interesting. He's got the forward status this year, but I could see him losing that and being a mid-only, just playing on that wing. And I don't know where he'll end up in the fantasy world, but certainly job security is as big as it's ever been in his young career, and yeah, he's doing really well. For St Kilda, Callum Wilkie. Now, if I'd asked you before the season who would be the number one averaging defender after round 6, I'm not sure you would have landed on Callum Wilkie. I wouldn't have. He put up another 130. I think that's back-to-back 130s, and he's just casually averaging 116 from the 5 fantasy rounds, but he also tonned in opening round as well. So I think his average is around 113. And all of this is with 100% time on ground for the season. He has not gone to the bench once. So how's he doing it? His intercept marking has gone to another level. And watching him, in the first quarter at least, he was all over Taylor Walker, and he was reminding me of Tom Stewart, just always in the right spot with the intercept mark. So, yeah, it's incredible what he's doing. 30 years of age, and yeah, I don't know if I can say he's not going to keep it up, because why not? Darcy Wilson went into the midfield mix. He had his first bunch of centre ball up attendances for this season. He had 39%, and he really impressed just with his burst of speed out of stoppage. And I think, for his career so far, it's always felt like he's sort of an outside winger, flank type guy, but I had heard that they see him as an on-baller down the track, and yeah, this game showed he's going to be an on-baller at some point anyway. So, yeah, he scored a 90, really impressed me. And then lastly, Rowan Marshall. Finally, some sign of life for the poor Roma owners who, it hasn't been fun going from having one of the absolute best rucks you can have to, what he's done so far, sharing with De Koning. But this was an interesting game because for those playing with the industry positions, he did get the forward status last week, so that's tick. Now, in this game, Tom De Koning, he got some sort of injury, I think a hip injury. He went down the rooms, and I swear 3 or 4 times the boundary rider said he's gone down to the rooms, and then he was back out playing again, and then he was back in the rooms. So he had low time on ground. He was injured for a lot of it, and this gave Marshall the opportunity to become the number 1, and he scored accordingly. Put up a 104 and looked like the Marshall we've grown to love. So I don't know injury reports just yet for the Saints, whether De Koning will be there next week. But if he isn't, oh man, could be a nice little run for those Marshall owners with forward status. On to Sunday, and North took care of Richmond. I didn't watch this game. I was tracking scores, and it was a bit odd. Richmond, I think they were kicked like 1-12 or something bizarre. But anyway, North ran away with it in the end. And, probably the biggest talking point from a keeper league for the whole round was the role change of Cam Zurhaar for North. He's always been a likely type. I've always kind of had an eye on him. He's just never really put up the scores as a forward. But they moved him to half back, and I didn't watch it, but everyone I've spoken to who did said he looked unreal in the role, like really flourished. Took 11 marks, scored 113. They're so weird, North. I mean, I'll talk about McKercher in a sec, because he was the guy there at half-back. We know they've got Caleb Daniel. Luke Parker's gone to half-back this year. I think Luke McDonald had a big game playing in that role. They have so many guys, and then out of nowhere, Cam Zurhaar pops up in the role. So I guess my point is, can we trust it? Will he just end up back in the forward line in a couple of weeks? I mean, he just could. But I've heard he was really good, so we'll see it again for this week, I'm sure. Colby McKercher was pushed to a high half forward role, which is just not what we want. If you're a McKercher owner, you want him at half back, you want him on the ball. He was at half forward last year, and it was terrible. But it was an interesting role. I mean, one of the guys in the group chat, was just making the point that even though he was starting at half forward, McKercher, he seemed to be then roaming up the ground and playing more a usual role. So, yeah, pretty weird. But no centre ball ups for him this week. And, yeah, obviously Zurhaar had that spot in the back line. So McKercher, he got to 90. He had a 60-point second half. I think there was a bit of junk time in that. But, yeah, very weird what they're doing. Cooper Trembath, he had a slow start but ended up doing what he does in nearly every game. Kicked 3 goals. Spent time in the ruck, scored 77. And I'm just going to keep talking about this guy and these numbers if he keeps doing this. So 9 career games, and these are the goals he's kicked in those 9 games. 3, 3, 3, 3, 0, 2, 3, 2, 3. Dude just kicks 3 goals in pretty much every game. He's kicked 22 goals, 7 in his 9 career games. And I don't know what else to say about this guy, but I'm a big fan. Jai Simpkin also scored 77, but I've just mentioned him because that tagging midfield role that looked really good for him last week did continue. He got the job on Timmy Taranto, and he attended the equal most centre ball ups along with Luke Davies-Uniacke. For the Tigers, I've got a bit to say about them this week, which is good. Kane McAuliffe found his way back into the CBA mix this week with 53% of them and scored quite nicely, put up a 97. And yeah, I was trying to look and see if it happened after Taranto went off with his concussion, but it looks like he was in there before that as well. So Taranto out next week, I'm assuming, will help McAuliffe's chances of staying in there. And I'll be honest, I was pretty surprised he was moved to a wing anyway. He looked pretty good in that role last year. Jack Ross, look, just kudos to this young fella. I mean, well, he's not so young anymore. He had to stand up this year, and he's really standing up for the Tigers. He put up a 123 on the back of 26 touches, 8 tackles and 2 goals, playing on the ball, and yeah, looking really good. Samson Ryan put up an 84. Just nice to see him post a good score because he got another opportunity as the main ruck. I don't know how far off Nankervis is, but I don't think he's too close to returning. So really good for Ryan to put up that score, and looks like he had a better game. The next Sunday game was another brilliant close one with Melbourne just holding off the reigning premiers at the G. Melbourne beating Brisbane. Great game of footy. Max Heath came in for his first appearance as a Demon, and I must say, when I saw they had traded for him last year, I did wonder about Max Gawn's prospects, just being a year older, and Melbourne really need to find the next guy. Although it does appear that Gawn's going to just play till he's 45. Anyway, they finally brought Heath in. He had 27% time on ground, which, I don't know, feels like the lowest we've seen from any non-injured player in the 5-man bench era that is this season. But it was just really interesting. So he didn't play much, Heath, only scored 16 points in fantasy, but it's just good for Max Gawn to have a bit of a chop out. And interestingly, Gawn finally scored under a ton. That was his first non-ton for the year with a 93, which is still pretty good. But also, he didn't take any marks, Gawny. So just that little bit of help from Heath, I think, is good for Melbourne. I just wonder if we're going to start to see Gawn regress even slightly as the number one guy that he's been this year. That's if Heath keeps his spot. I didn't watch the game. I don't know how he actually looked, but I know that they've needed a chop out for Gawn for some time. Anyway, I want to talk about this guy, Colton Tholstrup. He's really caught my eye this year because he's had some CBA exposure playing as a tagger, a nice midfield tagging role. He's done some good jobs too. Now, last week he had a career-high 22 disposals, and then he beat that again this week with 26. But the way he did it this week really took me by surprise. Christian Salem, Xavier Lindsay, Chenkuth Giath, Trent Rivers, they're all out. They're all the halfback sort of kick-ins guys for the Ds. So I think we're all wondering who's going to take that role this week. I thought maybe Caleb Windsor would go back there instead of his midfield role. But no, it was Tholstrup. He took 10 out of 12 kick-ins, and smart lad played on every time. So he got 30 points just from that, and really interesting to see what's next for this guy. But his scoring hasn't really... I think 73 that he got in this game was his best for the year. But just the way they're using him, trusting him with tagging roles, trusting him with kick-ins, really interested to see what's next for this kid. For Brisbane, Bruce Reville is put up another really nice score with an 84, playing on the wing, took 9 marks. I talked about him a few weeks ago. He just looks a bit different this year. He looks like he's more around the footy, and he's really evolved into a ball winner. Now, Jared Berry went out early in this game, I think, with a calf injury that will probably sideline him. So I just wonder if that will give Revel even more of a time on the wing, although he did have an ankle concern himself, so hopefully he's all right for next week. Darcy Wilmot put up a 105, and with Dane Zorko out injured, it meant someone was going to get a bit of a bump. And yeah, no surprises that Wilmot puts up a season-high score, 27 touches, 9 marks, just doing the very nice things that he does back there. Sam Draper got his first look as the number 1 ruck for Brisbane because Darcy Fort was a late out, replaced by Zane Zakostelski, and he only had 31% time on ground. So him and Max Heath, geez, they barely had a look. So anyway, this was exciting for Draper to get that first shot as the number 1 ruck, and unfortunately, he scored 48. He only had 6 touches of the footy, gave away 3 frees against, but he was up against Max Gawn. So yeah, interesting to see. I think Fort was only late. He was only out with illness, I think. So he probably just comes back in next week, which I don't think is the worst thing for Sam Draper, to have more time as a 1-2 ruck setup and playing forward as well. And then the last game to round out a massive round of footy was the derby over in Perth. West Coast and Freo. And I was really looking forward to this. Fremantle have been so impressive this year. I guess I didn't really give the Eagles a chance of winning, but I thought they'd take it up to them. And look, to be fair, they did for a long period of the game. They just couldn't kick a goal. And, Freo got away and it was a comfy win. But yeah, I think there's positives for both sides. Looking at West Coast first, Elliot Yeo was back, looking fit, playing mostly on the ball. Didn't take any marks, but he did lay 7 tackles, kicked a goal, scored a very nice 85. So good to see him back. Speaking of players coming back, Milan Murdoch. He missed a few weeks with injury and didn't miss a beat. He returned with 19 touches, 8 tackles for an 86. And this guy's unreal. He now has a career average of 90, albeit from 3 games. But for someone playing in a bit of a half forward, up the ground, a little bit of midfield time, he's just tackling his way to big scores. And yeah, he's pretty exciting. For Fremantle, Hayden Young was back. Great to see him back. 23 touches, 8 marks, scored a 92, which was more than, Sarong and Brayshaw. So, yeah, it was a pretty reasonable hit out for him. Playing mostly on ball, a little bit of forward time. It really just, it's just important that he gets through the game and gets through training and they can get some continuity, because Hayden Young's the sort of player I just don't think we've even seen Skerrick of what he's going to be capable of because of all the injuries he's had. So fingers crossed he stays fit. And then the last guy, Murphy Reid. Wow, this guy is really surprising me every week. I didn't think he'd have a second-year breakout. I thought he'd take a bit longer, but yeah, I was very wrong. He is flying. He was absolutely everywhere in this game. He had 26 touches, 5 marks, 5 tackles for a 106, and he didn't even attend a single centre ball up. Imagine how this guy's going to go when he's in that midfield permanently. Very exciting times for anyone who's got Murphy Reid in their side. All right, deep breath. That was a big round of footy and a lot going on with the Keeper League world. Now, before I wrap up this week's episode, just a reminder that if you are enjoying the podcast, please like and subscribe wherever you're listening. Give it a 5-star review while you're at it. And of course, head over to the X page at FindKeepAFL and give it a follow to stay up to date with everything that's happening with the podcast. That's it from me. I'll be back again next week to look at round 7, the Anzac Day round. And it's always weird when Anzac Day falls on a Saturday and the big Essendon Collingwood game isn't during the week. Anyway, looking forward to that game and all the other games in round 7. Can't wait. So as always, thank you for listening. Good luck for the round ahead. And in the meantime, I'm Jordox. This has been Finders Keepers. And until next time, keep on keeping on.